Living with children can be one of life's most rewarding experiences. Kids can provide their parents with warmth, affection, fun, and excitement. But raising kids is not for the faint of heart. Kids can also fight with each other after you've had a long day. Talk in the classroom instead of listening to the teacher. Badger you when you're on the phone and trying to get your work done. And throw ferocious tantrums when they don't get what they want.
That's the way our house was in the morning.
This video program, 1, 2, 3 Magic, Managing Children's Difficult Behavior, will help parents and teachers deal gently and fairly with the obnoxious behavior of young children. The program will also teach you how to recognize and manage the 6 kinds of testing and manipulation. Since the first workshop in 1984, 1, 2, 3 Magic has helped millions of parents and teachers enjoy their children more. This award-winning and best-selling program is presented by Dr. Thomas W. Phelan, a clinical psychologist with over 25 years of experience working with children and families.
My response to the program was very positive. It worked like magic.
Now, here's Dr. Phelan.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for coming. I've talked to hundreds and probably thousands of parents over the years, and I ask them, what kind of kids do you want? And they mostly say about the same thing. They say, I want kids who listen and kids I can enjoy, and that's what our program is about today. The 1, 2, 3 is a how-to-do-it program. It's a down-to-earth program. We're not going to talk about child development. We're not going to talk about philosophy of child rearing, abstract subjects. We're going to talk about how do you get the kids to listen. The 1, 2, 3 program now appears in 2 videos. In our video today, 1, 2, 3 Magic, we're going to talk about how to manage and deal with obnoxious and difficult behavior, and also how to recognize and manage testing and manipulation. In more 1, 2, 3 Magic, we're going to talk about encouraging good behavior, independence, and self-esteem. You'll find a 1, 2, 3 Magic program works. Teachers tell me it makes discipline a whole lot less exhausting and I have more time for instruction. Parents tell me it gets the discipline stuff out of the way and I have more time to enjoy my kids. I have more time to spend with my kids. We can have a good time. You'll find that the 1, 2, 3 classroom or home is simple, but it's not easy. The simple part of the program has to do with the basic structure of the program. Nothing could be much simpler. When I was in graduate school, they taught us all kinds of things we could do in parenting programs when we got out of school, and I found that we had all these neat ideas, but nobody was doing them. And part of the problem was that they were too complex. Parents are busy, teachers are busy. You have to have something that they can relate to and use. So it's a simple program, but it's not easy. Now, the not easy part has to do with the fact that if you're going to discipline a child, you need to do 2 things. One is you need to know what to do in any one given situation. And second, you need to exercise a good deal of behavioral and emotional self-control. This is the age of kind of let it all hang out, you know, express your feelings. Is that true if you're a parent or a teacher? It's half true. When you're feeling positively toward a child, affectionate, liking them and all that, let it all hang out. You're not going to do anything harmful. It's when we parents and teachers are irritated with kids that we are dangerous. That's where we need control, and that's what the 1, 2, 3 tries to provide. Now, if you agree with what I'm going to present here today, you can go home and start immediately. If you're a teacher, you can start in mid-year if you would like. If you do start immediately, you will find that things will change right off the bat. But there's good news and bad news. The good news is this: about half of the kids represented by you as parents here today will be what we call immediate cooperators. That means they'll cooperate immediately. What do? You just relax and enjoy it. That's the good news. Bad news is the other half of the kids are going to be what we call immediate testers. They're going to get worse. They're going to push you. They're going to give you a hard time. They're going to see if you're really serious with this new program. You're going to regret that you ever showed up here today. But if you stick with it, you can usually get them shaped up in about 7 to 10 days. Teachers in a classroom will not get so much initial testing and manipulation, which we'll talk about a little bit more. But if you start immediately, and I encourage you to do that, otherwise you may never do it. Some kids cooperate right away, some kids give you a hard time. People ask me some of the time, did you use this with your own 2 kids or did you just learn it in graduate school? Well, I sort of told you before, I did not learn it in graduate school. My wife and I do have 2 children. They're older now. My son, the oldest, was a handful. In fact, he was 3 3/4 handfuls. He was very, very active. We considered naming this program The Art of Self-Defense at one point. But we didn't. My daughter, 22 months his junior, was a much more mild-mannered soul. But the 2 of them together, biggest problem, sibling rivalry. And I'm sure a lot of you have that problem as well. But our kids are graduates of the 1, 2, 3 program. That's the way my wife and I raised them.
Good parenting and good teaching begin with straight thinking. You'll never learn to manage your kids sensibly if your head is full of mistaken notions. Raising children is a tough job, and wishful thinking will get you nowhere.
There are 2 things that we have to get straight. The first is this. When you have a problem with a child, it is going to come in one of 2 forms, generally speaking. Either number 1, the kid is doing something that you want him to stop, okay, some difficult or obnoxious behavior, you want him to quit it. Or number 2, the child is not doing something good that you want them to start. So we call these 2 things stop behavior and start behavior. It's a little awkward, but it helps you remember it. Our goal today is to deal with stop behavior. In the video, more 1, 2, 3 Magic will deal with start behavior. So, what is stop behavior? Stop behavior is things like arguing, yelling, whining, fighting, screaming, teasing, sibling rivalry, temper tantrums, all the frequent but minor things the kids do during the course of the day. Each one isn't so bad, but a steady diet of it by 5 o'clock in the afternoon. You want to hitchhike to Seattle and never return home again. And we've all had days like that. Now, with stop behavior, all that stuff, now here's the simple thing about the 1, 2, 3. You're going to use the tactic called counting. And that's the first thing I will explain to you. So when it comes to minor obnoxious behavior, not major obnoxious behavior, poking your sister in the eye, knocking a golf ball through your neighbor's picture window on purpose, stealing, lying, we use the major-minor system with that. But this minor stuff, arguing, yelling, whining, you're going to count it. I saw a book recently, it was called Winning the Whining War. Now let me tell you, you do not need a book about whining. You're going to count whining and it'll work very well. In more 1, 2, 3 Magic, we'll have 7 tactics that you can use for start behavior. So 2 different kinds of problems, basically. The other thing we have to get straight is this. Most of us, I know it's true of my wife and myself, when we start out as parents and teachers, we start out with a false assumption about kids. It's kind of like almost a false hope in our minds, or a wish that kids would be a certain way. And this false assumption causes a lot of trouble, causes a lot of talking that doesn't do any good, causes a lot of arguing that doesn't do any good, and it causes a lot of worse things than that don't do any good either. The false assumption about kids that I'm talking about, we call the little adult assumption. It's the idea that kids are just shorter than us, but basically they have hearts of gold, and they're reasonable and unselfish. The kid's acting up, and you explain to him why he shouldn't act up. He looks at you and says,
I never thought that way before. Sure, that makes sense. I'll clean my room right now.
I agree with your point of view.
I'll never, ever tease my brother again.
I appreciate you taking the time to explain it to me. You have a 7-year-old son. He's constantly torturing his 4-year-old younger sister. What should you do? Well, if he's a little adult, you sit him down, you calmly look him in the eye, and you explain to him the 3 golden reasons why he shouldn't torture his little sister. Number 1, it hurts her. Number 2, it makes you mad at him. And number 3, how would he feel if somebody treated him like that? If the kid is a little adult, his reaction will be what? Slap himself upside the face, stagger back a few paces, he'll look at you and say, gee, I never looked at it like that before. And then he will stop teasing her for the rest of his life. I can tell those of you who are laughing are real parents with real kids. You know kids are not like that. One writer years ago, she said, I don't remember her name, she said, childhood is a period of transitory psychosis. Some of you know what that means. It means your kids, when they're little, are basically nuts. And whose job is it to make them sane? It's your job to make them sane, and the teacher's job to make them sane. But let's face facts, kids don't come out reasonable and unselfish. They come out selfish and unreasonable. And it's our job to train them to be different. But if we believe in this little adult idea, what are we going to do? We are going to use and overuse words and reasons in dealing with our kids. You're not going to believe this. I'm a clinical psychologist. Now, psychologists are always talking about communication. This is the 21st century. This is the age of communication. What you're going to hear today from a clinical psychologist in the 21st century is don't talk so much. What's wrong with talking too much? Well, I'll tell you two things now, and I'll tell you several more later. One thing wrong with talking too much is what we call the water off a duck's back syndrome. You ever had the feeling you're talking and talking and talking to a kid? It's like water off a duck's back. It doesn't do any good. I had a mother call me. This is a true story. 20 years ago, a mother called me and she said, Dr. Phelan, I want you to see my 10-year-old son. I said, what's the problem? She said, I think he's hard of hearing. The kid was not hard of hearing. The kid heard what he wanted to hear. A worse problem with talking too much is what we call the talk, persuade, argue, yell, hit syndrome. And you can probably imagine what this is. Kid's not doing what you want him to do. And you read in the book, talk it out. Talking's not working. Now you're trying to persuade the child. Persuasion isn't working. Now you're arguing with the kid. Arguing isn't working. Now you're screaming at him. Screaming isn't working. Wham! You hit him. Now I'm not suggesting that you're all going around hitting your kids, but I will suggest, seriously, biggest cause of child abuse in this country, physical child abuse, not sexual, but the biggest cause of physical child abuse is what? The little adult assumption. It's a parent who read in a book somewhere, you got a 3-year-old, you got a problem, just talk it out. Even if it takes 4 hours, everything will fall into place. Now it's 4.5, 5 hours, parent beats child. You would be surprised, maybe some of you wouldn't, how much physical child abuse starts with an innocent attempt to talk to a kid at the wrong time. So we've got to replace this little adult idea with something else. What I'm going to suggest is going to sound a little strange, and I admit it's a little bit of what I call cognitive shock value. So what I'm about to say to you, you can take with a grain of salt, but it goes like this. Rather than thinking of your kids as little adults, think of yourself as a wild animal trainer. Now don't take offense. Don't start throwing stuff at me. I'm not trying to insult your kids. Remember, I had 2 of my own, and I'll guarantee you there were days when I thought, God put 2 little beasts on earth with no other goal than to drive me out of my mind. They enjoy the job, and they're very good at it. And I'm sure you've had days like that, too. But what does a wild animal trainer do? A wild animal trainer chooses a method and repeats it until the trainee does what he wants them to do. My job today is to present a method to you. If you choose, you don't have to. If you choose, you repeat it until the trainees, the kids, do what you want them to do. And fortunately, it does not take that long. There are too many parents these days in the United States kind of afraid of their kids. You know, they don't know exactly what they're supposed to be doing with them. And so in a situation where they're going to discipline them, they explain and explain and explain and explain. You notice a wild animal trainer doesn't do that. They pick a method, it's gentle, it's not abusive, it's largely nonverbal, and they repeat it until the trainee does what they want them to do. So what is the wild animal trainer model? First thing I'm going to tell you is what it is not. 2 biggest mistakes we make, parents and teachers, in dealing with kids: too much talking and too much emotion. The too much talking we just talked about, but we're going to come back to it. The too much emotion goes like this. What's wrong with getting too excited? Well, little kids, when they're little, have a strong sense of being inferior. And the reason they feel they're inferior is because they are inferior. They are shorter than everybody else, less privileged, less powerful, less impact on the world, and it bugs them. And you watch your kids, you know that it bugs them. Watch your 2-year-olds. They want to be like your 5-year-olds. 5-year-olds want to be like your 10-year-olds. 10-year-olds want to be like you. They want to drive cars and use credit cards. You know, they want to have an impact on the world. So you can see a kid go down to a lake or something, take rocks, you know, throw them in the water. They can do that for hours because why? They're making the big splash. You say, what does this have to do with home? What this has to do with home is if this little kid can get big old you all upset and yakety, yakety, yak, the big splash is you. And the inferior part of the child will be gratified by his or her power. Does this mean they're sick? No. Does it mean they're going to grow up to be professional criminals? No. It's just part of being a natural a kid. But what it does mean is that if you have a child and they're doing something that you don't like, go ahead and get upset about it on a regular basis, and sure enough, what? They'll repeat it for you. I have parents coming in all the time. They say, Dr. Phelan, this kid's driving me nuts. I say, well, give me an example. Last night, Doc, we're eating dinner. We had mashed potatoes. He's eating them with his fingers out of the bowl. This drives me crazy. Why does he do it? And I say, you may have just answered your own question. He may do it in part because it drives you crazy. So throughout the program, we talk about what we refer to as our no talking, no emotion rules. Really, it's very little talking and very little emotion because we're all human. Too much talking, too much emotion will blow any discipline program. There's other discipline programs. Some of them are pretty good. I may be prejudiced. I think this one's the best. You can ruin any of them by too much talking and too much emotion, and the emotion is usually anger or frustration.
Now you know what to think, and perhaps more important, what not to think about kids and about parenting. Your children are going to be grown up and out of the house sooner than you think. You want your time with them to be fulfilling and enjoyable today. That means having fun with your kids, praising them, and listening to them. It also means managing kids' difficult behavior effectively. Dr. Phelan now explains how to accomplish that, step by step. It works, and it's easier than you think.
Okay, we said before we're going to talk about how do you get the kids to listen. So let's get down to the brass tacks here and talk about how do you get the kids to listen. What I'm going to talk about first is what we call the 1, 2, 3. Okay, this is our just basic counting procedure, and let me tell you two things about it. One, what are you going to count? You're going to count stop behavior. Minor obnoxious behavior is countable. Arguing, yelling, whining, fighting, teasing, screaming, sibling rivalry, all that kind of stuff you're going to count. Second thing I want to tell you before I get into it is if you're not familiar with the 1, 2, 3, I know some of you are, you may be back here for a refresher course. If you're not familiar with the 1, 2, 3, when you first hear about it, you're going to be skeptical. Okay? You're not going to believe it. Some people say, it's too simple. Some people say, no, it's not going to work with my kid. And some people come up to me and they say, it's not going to work with my kid. My kid is a wild man. Actually, I sort of enjoy it when they say this because I look back at them and I say, well, I'll tell you something, my kid was a wild man too. And if you want to have a wild man contest, my kid will have yours for lunch. And it worked with mine, so why don't you try it? You know, people go home, they try it, they say, I can't believe it worked like magic. That's where we got the title, even though there's no claim to magic at all. But if you feel a little skeptical, don't worry about it. Go home, try it, see what happens. All right, let's imagine that you have a 4-year-old. Some of you do not have to imagine that you have a 4-year-old. How many 4-year-olds do we have represented in this group? Okay. Boy, that's a lot of 4-year-olds. If I had a 4-year-old at my age, I would be dead in 3 days. So I give you credit for having a 4-year-old. You got a 4-year-old. This kid, 6 o'clock at night, total nuclear holocaust on your kitchen floor. He is enraged because you, in your hardness of heart, would not give him a bag of Fritos right before dinner. Kid has thrown himself down on the floor. He's banging his head. He's biting his arm. He's kicking your new kitchen cabinets. He's screaming bloody murder. You can hear it all the way down the block. And you're at a loss for what to do. You think, what should I do? What should I do? Pediatrician told you to ignore it. You say to yourself, I don't think I could stand that. Your mother told you to put a cold washcloth on his face. I think that's an old Italian remedy or something. And your husband told you to beat the hell out of him. None of these are acceptable alternatives. Instead, what you do is you hold up one finger, you look down at the little devil, and you say, that's 1. He doesn't care. He's out of his mind with rage. He keeps screaming, yelling, banging. Temper tantrum continues full force. 5 seconds go by. You hold up 2 fingers. You say, that's 2. That's all you say. Same lousy reaction. 5 more seconds go by. You hold up 3 fingers. You say, that's 3. Take 5. Now, what does all this mean? It means that the child had 2 warnings to shape up. Those are the first 2 counts. And in this instance, he blew it. He did not shape up. So at 3, there's a consequence. Rest period, timeout alternatives. We'll talk about those later. So the child goes to timeout. Some of you are wondering, how do I get him there? And when he comes back from timeout, And you won't believe this, when he comes back from timeout, no talking, no emotion, no lectures, no apologies, no discussions, no nothing, unless it's absolutely necessary, and it usually is not. You do not say to the kid, for example, now are you going to be a good boy? Do you realize what you've been doing to your mother all afternoon? Why do we have to go through this all the time? I'm so sick and tired of this, I could scream. Your sister never behaves this way. Your father's coming home in a half an hour. Did God put you on earth to drive me crazy or what? Tempting as that may be, you don't say anything at all. Kid's good, you enjoy it. Kid acts up again, you say, that's one. That's the 1, 2, 3. That's the simple part. What's going to happen in a relatively short period of time is you'll start getting a good response at 1 or 2. And I will promise you right now, the first time you stop a fight between two of your kids across 15 feet of family room, and all you got to do is say that's 1 or that's 2, and you don't have to get up and yell or scream or do something else you're going to be sorry for later. First time you do that, you're going to feel real good. Some people say, my kid always takes me to 2. Don't you think he's manipulating me? And my answer is, no, I don't think the kid's manipulating you, always taking you to 2. Why? Because what used to drive me crazy was 42. I'll give him the 2, because at 3, he's going to get the X. Some people say, what if the kid does something so bad, I don't want to give him 3 chances to do it? It's a good question. For example, if your kid hits you, your kids can't hit you. Kid hits you, you're not going to say, that's 1. That'd be pretty silly. You say, that's 3, take 5, add 15 more for the seriousness of the offense. Kid goes to school, he's 7 years old, he learns a bad word. He doesn't know what it means, but he wants to try it out on you. That night, you say to him, he's on the couch, would you please turn off TV, get ready for bed? And he says, you blankety blank. And what do? That's 3, take 5, add 15 more for the rotten mouth. And then he's going to go. And when this kid comes back from timeout, this is an example when an explanation is in order. When this child comes back, you are going to take some time and briefly explain to him what that word means and why he's not going to use it in your house. How long do you take in between counts? You remember? 5 seconds, that's right. And why 5 seconds? Because there's a difference between stop and start behavior. Start behavior like homework or going to bed, getting up and out in the morning could take 15 minutes, it could take 45 minutes. It takes a long time. But stop behavior, how long does it take a child to terminate a temper tantrum? 1 second. How long does it take a boy to stop teasing his sister? 1 second. We give him 5, that's being very generous. But kids are just kids, so you wouldn't say to a little child, 5 years old, that's 1 at 9 o'clock in the morning, that's 2 at 3:30, that's 3, take 5 at 7:15 at night. They won't remember the sequence. So we have what we call our window of opportunity, and with a 6-year-old, you might pick a half hour and you say, if you do 3 things within a half hour, I'll count you up to 3. If you do 1 thing, 45 minutes goes by, and then you do something else, you'll go back to 1. And there's very few kids that get so manipulative that they'll, do 1 thing, look at their watch, and they say, well, 45 minutes is up, I get a free 1. I can do whatever I want. So what's going to happen basically is you'll start getting a good response at 1 or 2, if you do it correctly. Now, what I've told you is a simple part of the 1, 2, 3. Let's talk about the hard part, the not easy part. I've had parents come back to me at different times and they say, Dr. Phelan, we went to your seminar and we enjoyed it, and we started, using the counting with our kids, and it worked. It worked. We were very surprised. But that was 6 weeks ago. It's not working anymore. I don't know if it's us, if it's the air in the house, if it's the dog, if it's the kid, whatever it is, not working anymore. We need a new discipline system. If I have a chance to talk to these people, which I don't always, if I have a chance to talk to these people, what's the problem? The problem is they are violating those 2 basic rules 90% of the time, not all the time. 90% of the time, they're violating those 2 basic rules, the no talking, no emotion rules. And I'm going to try and give you an example of how these parents do it. They think they're doing the 1, 2, 3, but they're really not. Let's go back to the 4-year-old on the floor having the royal temper tantrum, kicking, yelling, screaming, and all this. This is how these parents think they're doing the 1, 2, 3. They hold up one finger like this. It's a good start. They look down at the child and they go, that's 1. Come on, I'm getting all sick and tired of this. Keep this up, you're going to wind up in your room. Look at me when I'm talking to you, young man. That's 2. 1 more and you're up there, pal. 1 more, baby. 1 more. Read my lips. 1 more. That's 3. Take 5. Get out of here. I never want to see you again. What was that? That was a parental temper tantrum. And now we've got two tantrums going in the same kitchen. What's wrong with doing it like that? Well, there are several. We've studied this for years. There are several things wrong with doing it like that. Number one, you want to talk to a kid like that? Did you have a bad day at work? You want to talk to a kid like that? I think a translation of what you're saying is, let's fight. I think that's what you're really saying. Number two, what's wrong with doing it like that? How's the kid supposed to find the warnings or the counts? They're buried in all this verbal garbage. The most important part of what you're saying is the 1, the 2, and the 3. But the third thing wrong with that, and I think the worst part of it, is you talk to a child like that, what you are doing on the spot is taking away from that child his or her own responsibility for their own behavior. Because what you're really saying now is you don't have to behave unless I can give you 2, 3, 4, or 5 good reasons why. And gee whiz, I certainly hope you agree with my reasons. This isn't discipline anymore. There's another word for this, starts with the letter B. This is called begging. What's the average kid going to do? They're going to take issue with your reasons. Julie doesn't always behave on the first try. Daddy's not coming home in a half an hour. Now you have left the discipline ballpark. You are out on the street arguing with the kid. What's the issue? Is the child behaving or not is the issue. So, to do it right, that's 1. Button the lip. That's 2. Nothing else is said. Otherwise, it doesn't work. Let's take a look at our famous Twinkie example. This will give you a better feel for how the 1, 2, 3 works. And this is a situation that you have been through. I'll guarantee you it may not have been a Twinkie, but it might have been some other kind of food. And here's the deal. It's 5:45 at night. You're in the kitchen making dinner, and you're going to eat in 15 minutes. You have an 8.5-year-old daughter, and she comes down into the kitchen. She says, "Can I have a Twinkie?" You say, "No, dear." She says, "Why not?" You say, "Because we're eating dinner in 15 minutes. Now, is there anything wrong with this conversation? Not a thing. Perfectly clear. And she asked a question, straightforward answer. What's the problem? Problem is most kids aren't going to drop it. And she looks at you and she says, "Yeah, but I want one." So what are you going to do? We're going to play this scene through 3 different ways. In scene 1, we will have starring for us a parent who believes in the little adult assumption. Kids are little adults, we can talk the whole thing out and everything will be just fine. Then in scenes 2 and 3, you'll see the parent will start using the 1, 2, 3 in the beginning, and then in scene 3 after the kid's used to it after a while. Okay, but scene 1 is the parent who believes the kid's a little adult, words and reasons solve the whole thing. Here's how it goes.
Can I have a Twinkie?
No, dear.
Why not?
Because we're going to eat in about 15 minutes.
Oh, come on. I really want one.
I just told you couldn't have one.
I never get anything.
What do you mean you never get anything? Are you wearing clothes? Is there a roof over your head? Am I not about to feed you in 2 seconds?
You gave Scott one a half hour ago.
Are you your brother? Besides, he always finishes his dinner.
I promise I'll eat my dinner.
Don't give me this promise garbage, Kelsey. Yesterday at 4:30 you had half a sandwich and then you didn't touch your dinner.
Fine then, I won't eat any dinner.
Don't you threaten me, young lady. You will eat what I tell you to eat.
Then I'm gonna kill myself and then run away from home.
Well, fine. Be my guest. I'm sick of this.
Well, family, peace, and tranquility are down the tubes in this house, so the parent gets smart and says, enough of this, enough of this. I'm going to start the 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Scene 2. The 1, 2, 3 counting in the beginning. The kid's not quite used to it. How's it going to go?
Can I have a Twinkie?
No, dear.
Why not?
We're going to eat in about 15 minutes.
Oh, come on. I really want one.
That's 1.
I never get anything.
That's 2.
Then I'm going to kill myself, and then I'm going to run away from home.
That's 3. Take 10.
What hits them right between the eyes when you first do it is, number 1, you're the boss. Number 2, you have a perfect right to impose this discipline on them, even if they don't like it. But notice you're doing it gently. This is the essence of gentle but firm. But what really hits them between the eyes is they soon realize that no longer can they bait you. It's B-A-I-T, as in fishing. Fishing for what? Largemouth bass. No longer can they bait you into a stupid, idiotic argument over a stupid Twinkie. Scene 3, the 1, 2, 3 after a while, after the child's used to it.
Can I have a Twinkie?
No, dear.
Why not?
Because we're gonna eat dinner in about 15 minutes.
Oh, come on, I want one.
That's one.
Oh, all right.
You don't have to count the all right because it's not so bad. The kid's leaving the scene of the crime. She's just grumbling a little bit. You know, the whole thing is done. If she said, oh, all right, you stupid jerk, that's 3, take 5, add 15 more for the rotten mouth. What's good about the 1, 2, 3? One explanation. You're going to save so much breath, you won't believe it. I tell you, teachers tell me, discipline is so much less exhausting and I have more time for instruction. Parents tell me discipline is so much less exhausting, I have more time to enjoy my kids. One explanation, and it usually is not necessary. Parents and books on parenting, let me tell you, overestimate dramatically the value and power of explanations to get compliance from kids. When you talk too much, you irritate a child and you distract them from what they're supposed to be doing. But we're all very intellectually oriented, and if I just tell them the reason, they'll look at me and say, gee, I never looked at it like that before, and they'll happily go off and comply. It doesn't work like that. Let me give you an example of an explanation, one that's necessary and one that's not. Let's say you got this little 7-year-old boy, and he's in school and he's taking trampoline, okay, and he loves trampoline. Now, I don't think they do this anymore, but let's just pretend. So this kid comes home, 7-year-old son of yours, and he's so excited about trampoline, he walks in the living room door, whips off his shoes, he attacks the couch. He's jumping up and down, trying to do flips and all this. You come in, it's like, whoa, that's one. He says, what did I do? Well, do we need an explanation? Yes, you've never been through this before. He's never been trampolining on your couch. So you say to him, well, even though you took off your shoes, which I appreciate, I'm afraid you might hurt the couch or hurt yourself if you go doing that. Good explanation. Now, 2 hours later, same day, same you, same kid, same house. You're in the kitchen talking to this boy's 4-year-old younger sister. And while you're talking to the little girl, the 7-year-old boy walks around behind her and for no reason you know of, bam, gives her an elbow in the back. And you say, that's one. He says, what did I do? That's 2. Stupid question. And you don't say stupid question. Well, what are you going to say? You just hit your sister in the back. We have 3 witnesses. Now you're out on the street arguing. So one explanation, if absolutely necessary, and with sibling rivalry is one of the things where you rarely need an explanation, even though sometimes kids will tell you, I don't know what I did. You know, hit their sister in the face. I don't know what I did afterwards. You know. Okay, what's good about the 1, 2, 3? No talking, no motion. Now, this is hard for some people. We could take all of us in this room and line us up in a line from the people who can button their lip easily to those who have to bite their lips bloody trying to be quiet. Some people are just natural talkers. I saw a t-shirt not too long ago, and on the t-shirt it said, help me, I'm talking and I can't stop. And I immediately thought about 15 people I could have bought this thing for. Some of you will have a hard time, some not. But a lot of people, once they start using the 1, 2, 3, and you see the power of silence, your silence speaks louder than your words. You say that's one, who's got the ball? They do, if you be quiet. It works better. And what also happens is you won't be as tired. You just won't. You'll get the discipline stuff done without a lot of this excess energy because you're not getting into talk, persuade, argue, yell, hit stuff and things like that. Another good thing about the 1, 2, 3 is that your authority is not negotiable. Never negotiate your authority when a rule is being enforced. Okay? As the years go by, though, what do you want to do? Some people say, you know, this counting sounds kind of like a dictatorship. Guess what? It is. When the kids are little. You know, when the kids are 5, it should be a dictatorship pretty much at your house, a nice one. But as the kids get older, it's dictatorship to almost democracy. So when the kids are 17 years old and they're about ready to leave, or 18, they have more say in the rules and policies that affect them. But when push comes to shove, who's paying the mortgage? You are, even at 17. Who knows better than they do what's good for them? You do, and you have a right and a duty to impose it on them, even if they don't like it. We often forget that. We think that we have to, whatever we do with our kids, they have to smile and happily accept it. That's not the deal. What's the route from dictatorship to democracy? One route is the family meeting, which we talk about in the more video. You sit everybody down and you discuss the problems you're having living together. Give the kids some experience with negotiating with other family members, which is a good preparation for marriage. Another thing that's good about the 1, 2, 3 is the punishment is short and sweet. Now, if we're using a timeout, you don't have to use timeout, we have timeout alternatives, but if you're using a timeout system, the rule is usually 1 minute of timeout per year of the kid's life for a timeout or a rest period. 2-year-old gets 2 minutes, 5-year-old 5 minutes, 10-year-old 10 minutes. It's not a sacred rule, but it's a general guideline that you can look to. So the punishment is short and sweet. We would time out our kids for fighting. Say, guys, that's 3, take 5 for both of you when they're fighting. Then we'd say, if you fight on the way up, it's 10, because they had to go up the same stairway and they'd be going like this all the way up. So they get a 10. They get a 10. They're up there now. Now, let's do a slow motion replay of the rest of this. They're up there for 10 minutes. They calm down. They come back downstairs. Am I going to bring up sibling rivalry? Are you kidding? Think I'm going to bring it? I want the kids to come out of timeout guilt-free. We start all over. All these people that tell you to talk. You know, there are books that say, you know, well, the kid's in timeout. What are they supposed to be doing? With a firm purpose of amendment, the child is reviewing his past actions and designing plans which can be implemented in the future to prevent the occurrence of similar behavior. When the child comes down, the parent then requests, what is your plan? For, you know, excuse me, I'm the kid, I'm aggravated by that kind of stuff. I don't think that is helpful. Punishment is short and sweet. I saw a family once, their kid stole a bike. Now, you can't use the 1, 2, 3 on that. Gets one bike, you say, that's one. Yeah. But what the parents did is they grounded this child for a year. So when they came in my office, they told me what they had done. I said, guys, you know, no offense, but this is stupid. You know, who's gonna implement it? It's gonna cause a war. You need a bigger punishment, but not something like that. I saw a lady once, and she got mad at her 9-year-old daughter. I don't know what it was the 9-year-old daughter had done. But this girl collected Cabbage Patch dolls, which were popular at the time. And this mom took one of the girl's Cabbage Patch dolls, you won't believe this, put it in the sink and set fire to it. Isn't that incredible? Amazing punishment. You want to punish your kids like that? You're going to start a war. 1 minute per year of your life. We're not going to start any wars. We'll talk about timeout alternatives a little bit later. The other thing about it is when the kids come back from timeout, it's done. They're friendly. Imagine you sent your boy up to timeout for something or other.
Jamal, time's up. You can come out now.
Hey, Dad. Look what I found in this book. It's really cool.
Let me see here. Wow, what is this?
Where's the resentment and anger? It's gone. It's done. We had the discipline, we made our mark, and we move on from there.
At this point, you may still be a little skeptical. After all, you're trying to manage kids in the real world. Your home is real, and your classroom is real. So is 1, 2, 3 magic applicable to real kids in the real world? You bet it is. 1, 2, 3 magic was not developed in an ivory tower. It was developed in the trenches.
Parents have a lot of concerns and questions about the 1, 2, 3, and I'm sure you do right now, and I'm going to try and respond to some of those. I'm going to tell you some of the concerns that most frequently come up when we're trying to apply the 1, 2, 3 in the real world. Parents and teachers ask good questions because parents and teachers are currently attending the College of Hard Knocks, and they know what's going on. So one question often comes up is, can you count different things in getting to 3? You say, well, what are you talking about? Well, what we're talking about is you don't have to have a different count for each different kind of misbehavior. It would drive you crazy. Well, he's on a 1 for teasing the dog. He's on a 2 for getting into it with his sister. He's on a 1 for yelling at me. He's on a 2 for something else. You go nuts. So, you know, he teases a dog, that's 1. Yells at you for counting him for teasing the dog, that's 2. Throws a block across the room, that's 3, take 5. Mom could say that's 1, Dad could say that's 2, Mom or Dad could say that's 3, take 5. In fact, we encourage it to share the joy of the 1, 2, 3. If you're in a classroom situation, teacher, and there's an aide, teacher could say that's 1, aide could say that's 2. You get the idea. Can you ever ignore anything? The answer is yes, but in the beginning, when in doubt, count. Be aggressive in the beginning, but not picky. Do not overparent. You could drive the kids crazy with the counting. It's very effective, but it tends to be a little addictive. And overall, what do you want? You want your positive feedback to your kids to be more frequent than your negative, and a count is a negative. So what are you going to do? You need the praise, you need the active listening, you need the shared fun to be overwhelming in frequency, the counting that you are doing. But once you've been on a roll with the counting for a while, maybe 6 weeks or so, you might experiment with ignoring something. So say you got your little Bobby, you know, and Bobby tends to get a little aggressive with other kids some of the time. And so he's got a friend over and they're both playing and he pushes this other kid right in front of you, you know. Don't say anything for just a couple seconds and watch your son. They can kind of feel the count coming. And many of them will spontaneously self-control and stop the negative behavior on their own without you having to intervene. Is this good? Yes. Now we're getting somewhere. Why? Because the child is internalizing the values. He's internalizing the system. Isn't that the kind of boy or girl you want to drop off when they're 18 years old in Macomb at Western Illinois University? Okay? A boy or girl who can self-control without mommy or daddy being there to keep an eye on them. How do you keep track? Who's on first? If you have a lot of kids. If you have 2 kids, it's not so bad. Teachers have been very creative in coming up with ways. And what we're looking at here is a teacher behavior stoplight. A behavior stoplight has a green, yellow, and red. And you can have these signify 3, 2, and 1, or the counts. So teachers who we're looking at has green, has all these clothespins on it, and what's on these clothespins is the name of a child. So if this child gets a count, they got to move their clothespin up to yellow and then up to red. So this is actually a 2-count system this teacher is using. Some teachers use 3-count systems. You can do all kind of stuff. You can have 3 pop containers with popsicle sticks, and the kids' names are written on them, and the containers are different colors. There's a lot of different alternatives for keeping track. Some teachers just write it down. Some parents write it down. Because if you're a teacher and you don't write down, who's going to tell you? Your kids will tell you. Oh no, Mrs. Smith, he's not on a 1, he's on a 2. And, what kind of consequences can you use? You know, timeout gets bandied about, and a lot of people think they know a lot about timeout. It's a favorite topic in newspapers, TV, and stuff like that, and you get kind of a negative impression of it. Timeouts work very well if you do them correctly, and we're talking about how to do them correctly. Timeout or a rest period. We also have timeout alternatives, where instead of giving a child timeout to the room or something like that, they may lose 20 cents off their allowance. Their bedtime may be 15 minutes earlier. They lose their computer time for the night. It can be a whole lot of different things, but small things that make their mark, that are not horribly punitive, as I mentioned before, that register with the child. The most important thing in a consequence being effective is that the parent administering the consequence not be having a temper tantrum while they're administering it. You'll see in some books it says punishment. No, it's not good with kids. Punishment is not good. Yes, it is. Mild punishment by a non-abusive parent works. What about the timeout place? If you're using a timeout, does it have to be the child's room? The answer, of course not. It could be a chair. It could be a rug in a classroom. Some kindergartens have a timeout rug, and they will go sit on that. It could be a lot of different things. Here we see a little girl. Imagine a little girl, and she's got a timeout in the kitchen, on a chair at the table. She's sitting there like this, very unhappy about the whole thing. Fine, good place for a timeout. If kids are going to use a chair or a rug or something like that, the provision, of course, is that they have to stay in it. And it's amazing. Some kids will, some kids won't. Some really difficult kids will sit in that chair. I've seen 2-year-olds. They're just wild children, and they'll sit in that chair. And then other ones, of course, will be getting up all the time. Will this cause the child to hate their room if they're timed out to the room? The answer is no. Not if you do it correctly. What does correctly mean? No abuse. No talking, no emotion, no abuse. You shake the kid, squeeze them, hit them, say, I wish you'd never been born, and then throw them in their room. They're going to hate the room. They're going to hate you, too. It's also going to hurt their self-esteem, you do it like that. The message basically from the 1, 2, 3 is, I say to you, that's 1. What does that mean? I'm your parent, you're my child. I love you, my job is to train you. When you do this, I do that. What if the kid won't go? You're doing a timeout system and the child won't go. Well, it depends on how big they are. Let's start with the small one first. Let's say you have a 5-year-old boy and he weighs 45 pounds. And let's say you weigh 125 pounds. And this 5-year-old, you say that's 3, take 5, and the kid's not going. What do? This is no time for little adult stuff. You know, come on now, why can't you do this for us when we do stuff for you all the time? Your sister always goes on the first try, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. None of that stuff. You just start moving toward the child. Some of them will stay 2 feet ahead of you all the way to the room. That's fine. That's fine. Some need to be escorted. An escort could mean take them gently by the arm, could mean pick them up, could mean drag and carry them, kicking and screaming. That's them kicking and screaming, not you. And you deposit the unwilling body in the timeout room for the timeout. What if you have an older kid? Your 5-year-old who was 45 pounds now is 10, weighs 95 pounds. You, through a rather rigid regime of diet and exercise, have maintained at 125, which would be excellent. And you say that's 3, take 10, and this kid's not moving. What are you going to do? You're going to do a timeout alternative, and it's going to go like this.
That's 3, take 10. Or that's 50 cents off of your allowance. Or bedtime is 20 minutes earlier tonight. You pick.
But you turn around and walk away. Why do you walk away? Because most kids are going to want to stick around and argue with you about how stupid the program is, how stupid the guy who wrote the program must have been. And frankly, I don't appreciate that kind of treatment. What if the child won't stay in the room? Most kids will stay in the room. Our kids will both stay in the room. My daughter would stay in the room with the door open. My son would stay in the room with the door closed. Why? Because he always slammed it when he went up there for a timeout. And you know, he was a tough kid. And about every 6 months, the frame on the door would cave into the hallway. And I would nail it back up. During the course of his staying with us, I nailed it back up probably half a dozen times. But they would stay in the room. If the kids don't, some parents in the beginning, when you're first doing the counting with little kids, they stay up there by the door to make sure the kid stays in and gets the idea they have to stay in. Some parents actually hold the door shut. Some parents make believe this, a Dutch door. You know what a Dutch door is? Dutch door is you saw the door in half, and you lock the bottom and the top is open so the child can look out. Amazing. I've had a few parents do that. And some parents put up a gate, and it blocks the child getting out. Now, if you know anything about gates, it doesn't take a very big kid to either knock it over or climb over it. Older kids, what you can do is you tell them, 5 and older, they can understand this. If you don't stay in for the whole time, you come out before your 5 minutes is up or whatever it is, it hasn't started yet. You got to go back in and start over. And some parents double the timeout as well. There are also plastic doorknob covers that you can put on doors, and there are locks. Now, I always say to people, as a last resort, you can lock the door. If you're a foster parent, you cannot. Certain provinces in Canada, you cannot. Now, some people get nervous about locking the door. In fact, I got a call once from the Department of Children and Family Services in Illinois. And they said, Dr. Phelan, we like your 1, 2, 3 Magic program, but there's part of it we can't use. And I said, what's that? They said, that's the part where you recommend locking the door. They said, that's child abuse. And I said, excuse me, I know the regs on child abuse. It is not child abuse. And they said, well, they're real nice. You know, they said, well, we have parents who sometimes lock kids in the room for 5, 6 hours just to get the kid out of their hair. And I said, well, that has nothing to do with 1, 2, 3 Magic. So we talked it over, and we came to a compromise between me and DCFS, and it was like this. If you feel you need to lock the child in the room, because some of these kids are really wild, it's got to be number 1, a last resort. Number 2, if you're worried about the child's safety, make sure the room is safe. We'll talk about this more later. Make sure the window is secured, and stay outside the door while the kid's in there during the timeout, but try not to let the child know that you are there. And number 3, obviously, no timeouts more than the recommended time. You don't stick the kid in there just to get rid of them. Room wreckers. Most of you will not get room wreckers. It's good news. But we like you to be prepared for anything in this program, so I'm going to tell you how to handle room wreckers. In fact, I'll tell you the story of the worst room wrecker we ever had in the program. It's a kid, parents brought him in to see me. He was 8 or 9-year-old boy. Turned out he was learning disabled and attention deficit disorder. Nicest kid in the office, which many of these kids are, but at home he was running the house. Parents told me and said, we're thinking of putting his name on the mailbox because it's not our house anymore. They referred to him as King Louis XIV. So I said, well, you know, okay, do you want to learn the 1, 2, 3? Mom and Dad said yes, and they went home. Well, these parents were amazingly efficient. They went home and they timed out King Louis for the first time. He was so enraged. How they got him to the room, I have no idea. He was so enraged, he trashed the place. What did he do? The first thing he did was he emptied his dresser. All the clothes came out, threw them all over the room. Then he really emptied the dresser of all the drawers, threw them all over the room. Then he destroyed his bed. Mattress and box spring knocked onto the floor. Now he's off to the closet. On the floor of the closet are shoes and toys. He takes them, scoops them out into the room. Hanging stuff, sails it one by one out into the room. And finally he went over to the window, tore down the curtains. That's about it. What else are you going to do? These parents did not call me, which is very unusual. They handled the whole thing themselves, and I have to tell you, they came back in 3 weeks, and they taught me how to handle room wreckers. Here's what they did. First thing they did is they did not clean up the room. And if you think about it for a second, you can imagine why. Clean up the room, I don't care who cleans up the room, you're loading the kid's gun again. He's got a perfectly neat room to wreck, and next time out he's going to wreck it and enjoy it just as much as he did the first time. So they did not clean up the room. Second thing they did, they continue to count this kid aggressively but fairly. This kid's an intimidator. Imagine you have a kid like this. Some of you may have a kid like this. And you go to work and you have a terrible day. Your boss chews you out. You come home, you got a migraine headache. You walk in the door, here's this kid. You know? Before you know it, he's on a 2. And then he hits something that should be a 3, but you're thinking, oh no, I don't feel like going through all this. So what do? 2.5, 2 3/4, 2 7/8. You know? They did not do that. They did 3. Boom, he's just back in there, and he just rearranges the slop every time. Bedtime comes, this kid has to find his pajamas. They're buried. He has to find his bed. Next day, he's got to find his clothes for school. How long did it take King Louis to realize there was new management in the old maison? About 8 or 9 days, he started calming down in timeout. And after he was calm in timeout for 3 or 4 days, they cleaned up the room with him because it was too much for any one person to do. And after that, this kid was good as gold. Stop him on a dime with the count. He hated to be counted. And he wouldn't question his parents about it at all. Now, did we break this kid's spirit? Is he now a permanent marshmallow? Eternal wimp? No, I think he's a nice kid, and the parents are running the show, and I think that's the way it should be. If you think you're going to have a room wrecker, a couple of cautions. Number 1, if there's anything dangerous or harmful in there, get it out before the first time out. If there's a hammer and a saw in there, for example, get them out before the first time out. Second, if there is anything valuable in there, get it out before the first time out. My wife came up to me after we'd been doing the counting for probably 6 weeks one day, and she came up and she had been crying. And I said, what's the matter? And she said, do you know that when we time out our son to his room, that he is smashing the World War II airplane set that he had worked so hard to build. He had about 14 airplanes, World War II airplanes, that he had made on his dresser. And he was smashing them. And I said to her, yeah, I know he had smashed a couple. She said, what should we do? So we talked it over and we said, well, on the one hand, it's his own stuff. If he's stupid enough to smash his own stuff, he's not breaking our stuff. But on the other hand, we knew he had a temper, and we thought maybe we should protect him from himself. You may not believe what we chose to do. We chose to leave the airplanes in there. And over the course of the next 2 or 3 months, he smashed every single one. And my wife and I regret our decision. If we had to do it over again, we would have taken the planes out and protected him from himself. Now, there are room wreckers and there are room wreckers. There are 3 and 4-year-olds. You time them out for the first time, they go in the room, they're so mad, they pull down their pants and they pee on the floor. There's not that many, I'm not trying to scare you. There are some 3 and 4-year-olds pull down their pants, they go number 2, and they smear it on stuff. And how many of you have ever known a child who can get himself so upset that he throws up? Yeah. There's always a few in every audience I ever talk to. What do you do with these kids? Well, first of all, the rule, you don't clean it up, does not apply, obviously. And secondly, you time these kids out to the bathroom. Now, I know what you're thinking. You wishful thinker, you, is what you're thinking. It's not that they're going to use the facilities appropriately. What's the point? A bathroom is easier to clean. So if you're going to get a kid and he's going to go to the bathroom on a huge carpet, you got to send it out and pay $80 to get it clean. The carpet in the bathroom you can throw in the washer and clean it yourself. But hopefully you won't get that far and won't get into that. What if we have kids at school in a classroom? Now in a classroom, when a teacher times out a child, maybe at a desk in the back of the room. As I said, with younger kids, kindergartners, it may be a rug over here. Sometimes it's behind a visual partition. What if this kid, though, won't go to the room, or won't come out, or goofs around when they're there? A teacher needs to be ready with some consequences for those things because the kid's already in timeout. And consequences can include a note home at the end of the day, a detention after the day, a visit to the principal, a reduction in recess, or a reduction in free time at lunch, or some other privilege that is meaningful to this kid during the course of that day. If a kid won't come out at school of the timeout, it's a problem. What if the kid won't come out at home? You time a child out and 5 minutes are gone, and you go up there and you say, 5 minutes is up, and the child says, I'm never coming out again as long as I live. You know, don't say good or promises or anything like that. We have a rule, you never chase a martyr. Just walk away. That's it. I had a mother a couple years ago, she asked me a question, and she said, the first time I timed out my 5-year-old to his room, he was so enraged that he barricaded himself in the room. He slammed the door and put this big V of stuff up against the door. And this mother, she looked at me and she said, I didn't know what to do. I looked at her and I said, I don't see the problem. When he wants to come out, he will unbarricade the door, which is exactly what he did.
Discipline is hard enough when it's just you and your own child. But what do you do when there are other people watching? Handling difficult behavior in public is a situation that all parents dread. Why is it that a crowd always seems to gather just at the time your son or daughter decides to act up?
What do you do if you have other people over? What are you going to do with counting if you have guests? You know? Well, let's start with kids. What if you have other kids over? My son, I told you, was a real live wire. And he had kind of two sets of friends. One, these real wild kids, and then these real calm kids. You ever seen some of these real calm kids? My son had this one little boy that used to come over and they used to play, and this kid was like a walking Valium to my son. They would play quietly. It was amazing. They were not arguing. They were not yelling. They were not fighting. It was wonderful. I wanted to buy this kid from his parents. But they wouldn't sell him. And then my son had his other live wire friends, and you get two of these hyperactive kids together, it's like Nellie batten down the hatches, we're in for it. So I developed this thing, and it was 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, out of the house and play. And what did that mean? It means 1, 2, 3, time out my son to his room. Other kids there. 1, 2, 3 again, time out my son to his room. Third time out, you guys got to go outside and play. And it worked pretty good. After a couple of months, I improved on that version, and with the third time out, I'd send him over to the other kid's house to play. Yes, I did. My wife said to me one day, what are they doing over there? I said, I don't care what they're doing over there. First time I timed out my son when he had a friend over, he came charging up to me. He waited till the kid left. He came charging up to me and he said, Dad. And I said, what? He said, it's so embarrassing when you count me in front of my friends. What do you say to him? You say, if you don't want to be embarrassed, you can behave. And that's it. What if you have other adults over? Other adults, you know, and something's going on and you feel the need to count. Well, you know, you're kind of worried. Is my kid going to cooperate? Is he going to make a fool out of me in front of this other parent? What often happens, though, say, is you get another parent and their child, and say it's your little Bobby, and Bobby's getting a little aggressive again. You say, Bobby, that's one. And he stops. The other parent looks at you like, what did you do? You know, they want to know what it is. That's how we get the word passed around some of the time. Grandparents. For the purpose of our program, grandparents come in 3 different forms. The first and rarest form of grandparent is the cooperative grandparent. Now what they do is they will count along with you. You say that's 1, grandma says 2, you or grandma says that's 3, take 5. That's great, but it doesn't happen that much. Second type of grandparent is also very nice, and this, I can't think of a better word, but I call them a passive grandparent, but I mean that in a good sense. They don't interfere with you parenting your own kids and don't give you a hard time. But if you're going out in the evening and they're babysitting, teach grandma and grandpa how to do the 1, 2, 3. Teach your babysitters how to do the 1, 2, 3. You'll be doing them a favor. And finally, we have some antagonistic grandparents. They get in the way. For example, I get little Bobby over here. You say, Bobby, that's 3, take 5. Grandma's sitting over here, and Grandma says, Oh, little Bobby didn't really do anything. Bobby, come and sit on Grandma's lap for a while. Some people ask at this point, can you count the grandparents? The answer is probably not, but you may have to be assertive with your parents. You may have to say, you know, Mom or Dad, I love you very much, but this is my house, these are my kids, this is why I'm raising them. You can't go along with the agenda. Visit may have to be cut short by a little bit. Can you imagine saying that to your parents? What do you do in public when you have an audience? How about on the phone? On the phone. This is a joke, right? Why is it the kids, every time the phone rings, kids go nuts? In our house, it wasn't just the kids, the dog would get into the act. I kid you not. Phone rings, dog barks. Dogs barking is a signal to the kids, we got another sucker on the line. Get down here as fast as you can. So they're all running around barking. The kids are barking. The dog is barking. Well, you know by now what I'm going to say. You got to count them when you're on the phone. Stand there talking, and you go like this. Or your son comes up to you. He wants something. Some people get so good that they just hold up the finger. They continue the conversation over here. Yeah, what do you think the Bears will do next year in the football? I don't know. I think the Green Bay will do a lot better than Takes a little, thank you, takes a little coordination, but it can be done. You may have to explain to the other person on the other end, you know, what you're doing. You may have to put the phone down. You may have to hang it up to escort this kid to the room. But do it. Otherwise, they will eat you alive, as you know, when you were on the phone.
Yeah. Well, I think we should...
Ma, I want to go by Scott's house and play.
I mean, no one makes it to her parties on time anyway.
I want to go right now.
Excuse me, Sally. Now that's 2. Yeah, I'm back.
The most frequently asked question, and I would guess in an audience this size, at least half of you have wondered about this, is what do you do when you're actually out in public? This is a scary situation. And, you know, a lot of parents, their first worry about it is, what am I going to do in public? There's no timeout room. Guess what? No problem at all. So that's the good news. The bad news is there's a much bigger problem. And any parent knows deep in their heart what the problem is. The problem going out in public with kids is this. When you go out in public, these kids can hold something over your head they can't hold over your head in private, and that is the threat of public embarrassment. No parent wants to look like a child abuser in aisle 5, the candy aisle of the local grocery store, and these kids know it when they're 13 months old, I swear. They are on to us, just like that. They sense that vulnerability. So what are you going to do? Well, let's imagine that that's the problem. Okay, you got a 5-year-old, aisle 5 is the candy aisle. Every time you go through there, he says, can I have a candy bar? All the candy bars weigh 40 pounds. You say no. Bam, he's down on the floor screaming, yelling, kicking, all this stuff. And don't you love this part? A crowd is gathering to see how you're going to handle it. So what are you going to do? What you do is you first make sure that you got the 1, 2, 3 rolling at home pretty well, where you're getting a good response at 1 or 2 most of the time. Most of the time, why not all the time? Because he's just a kid. So you're getting a good response at home. Now you're in aisle 5, kid is on the floor, having a royal temper tantrum, the crowd has gathered, you hold up one finger, and you go, just like you would at home, that's 1. Just like that. What's the key here? The key here is what you don't do, not so much what you do. You don't do this. That's 1. Come on now, I don't want you making a fool out of me in front of all these people. You say that or indicate that, kid knows you can be had for a nickel. He's going to forget the candy bar. He'll have so much fun torturing you. Now, some parents say, okay, so far so good, but there's still no timeout room. The solution to this problem we call timeout room, timeout place. And again, it's one of these things that parents sort of taught me rather than vice versa. Parents, you know, who'd been in the heat of battle, in the museums, the restaurants, you know, all these public places. Timeout room, timeout place. I'll give you some examples from the grocery store. One couple had a little 2-year-old, and when he would hit 3, they would just stand there in the aisle, right on the spot, holding his hand for 2 minutes. Wouldn't talk to him. You don't talk to him during timeout. Another couple would pick the kid up, put him in the cart. 2 minutes. Timeout room. Corner of the store. Timeout. Timeout place. Bathroom in the store. Timeout room. Kids old enough, you can time them out to the front of the store. If you feel comfortable, you have a 10-year-old, you say, that's 3, I want you in the front of the store, and I will meet you when I am done. You can also use the car for a timeout room. Some parents go to all the trouble of sending the kid back to the car. So imagine you're going shopping with your daughter, and you pull up in the parking lot at the shopping mall.
Now we're gonna go in here for just a few minutes, okay? You can have one treat up to $1, but if you start bugging me about anything else, I'm gonna have to start to count, okay? Okay, come on. You out? Come on.
Well, sure enough, she gets some stuff up to about 90 cents. Then she wants more. She starts bugging you. You say, that's 1, that's 2, that's 3. You bring the little girl back out to the car. She sits in the car for the duration of the time. Some parents say, that's a lot of trouble to go through. Yeah, it is, but it's an investment in your future. So where can you do the timeout? You can do the timeout lots of places when you are out in public. I've had some parents, and I say, you know, what do you do in this aisle 5 thing with the candy bar tantrum? And these parents smile. I say, why are you smiling? They say, I just leave them there and go around aisle 6 by myself. You meet somebody in aisle 6, you say, boy, you hear all that racket in the next aisle? I can't believe some of these people. We're talking about what do you do when you have an audience. Now, when you're driving around in the car, you sort of have an audience. You do and you don't. But let's talk about the car because it's kind of difficult. Now, there are short trips and there are long trips. Short trips, you'd think one of the things you could do was 1, 2, 3, timeout, serve it when you get home. Doesn't work. I think there's too long of a delay between the 3 and the actual timeout, and it doesn't work. Timeout alternatives seem to work better in that situation. Or one of the things that you can do is kids are arguing in the back seat of the car, for example. They hit 3, pull the car off to the side of the road.
You're the one who broke it. I was not.
That's 1.
You were so. Liar.
Okay, that's 2.
You're so dumb. You tried to throw yourself on the ground. You missed. Oh, yeah? You're so dumb.
Okay, that's 3. We're taking 5.
And you sit there for the duration of the timeout. Parents who have used the car timeout like that tell me that it works very well, provided, of course, that the parent does not get into an argument while they are sitting there. What about long trips? Long trips in a car can be very challenging. And in fact, they can be very difficult. Be honest with you, my wife used to say, let's go on a vacation. I would say, no thanks, I'd rather go to prison. And she'd say, what's the matter with you? Are you having a bad day? I say, no, I'm not having a bad day. But when we go on vacation, there's 2 prisons. The first has 4 wheels, that's the car, and the second has 4 walls, that's the motel room. You ever been driving along the interstate, your left hand on the steering wheel like this, and your right hand is waving madly through the back seat trying to hit this kid, torturing his sister for the 90 millionth time, and a car is weaving all over the road. You know, cop picks you up for reckless driving. Those are the kind of trips we used to have. My wife said to me one time, she said, let's drive around Lake Michigan. I said, with the kids? She said, yeah. I said, I don't want to go. She said, you have to go. You're the father. It's your own son. So I was panicked. The kids were still in car seats. And so I went down. I'm supposed to be a psychologist. Forget that. I went down the basement. I found the biggest suitcase I could find. It was made out of cloth. I emptied it. And I got some baling twine. And I took this suitcase and I put it in the back seat between the 2 car seats, and I tied it to the light in the ceiling. And I hung it down. You see the idea? They won't see each other. And they won't be inclined to fight. It didn't work. They took it as a challenge, and the way they would play the game is they would look in the rearview mirror to see where their old man is looking, and then they'd sneak their arm around behind the suitcase, go wham on the other guy all the way around Lake Michigan. We get back home from this terrible trip. My wife says, let's go to Disney World. 20-hour drive. I said, with the kids? She said, yeah. I said, I don't want to go. She said, you have to go. You're the father. So now we have the same thing again. Now I'm thinking 20-hour drive to Orlando. Said to myself, Phelan, you're supposed to be a psychologist. Try and think this one through. So I started thinking, and I said to myself, well, what's the true purpose of a father in Disney World? The answer came to me immediately, money. And then I said to myself, why should I just give it to him? Why don't I make him earn it? So the night before we left, I sat the 2 kids down and I said, well, guys, as you know, tomorrow we're going on another one of our so-called vacations. I said, the biggest problem is you guys fighting. And, you know, then I'm yelling at you, then Mom's yelling at me, and then I want to get out of the car and walk home. I don't care where we are. I said, we can't do that anymore. And they said, what are we going to do? I said, we're going to do something we've never done before. I said, we're taking along in the car a kitchen timer. And I'm going to set this timer for 15-minute segments. And if you guys go for 15 minutes without fighting, you each earn 25 cents toward your spending money in Disney World. But I said, there's a catch. They said, what's the catch? I said, the catch is you either both earn it or you both lose it. I said, I'll promise you right this minute, there will be no time when one of you earns it and the other one does not earn it. And then I said, if you were perfectly good, and I don't expect you to be perfectly good, you're just kids, but if you were perfectly good, you would each earn $20 each on the road to Orlando. So next day we took off in the car. In the car we had a clipboard, 8.5 by 11 pad of paper, pencil, kitchen timer, set it for 15-minute segments. If they don't fight during that 15 minutes, hey, great job guys, you each earn 25 cents more, all the way down to Disney World. 20-hour drive, maximum each one of them could earn was $20. Each child, believe it or not, earned $19.75. They had one fight the whole way down. My wife and I were in hog heaven. We could not believe it. My son, you know how kids treat their younger sister. My son at one point turns to his younger sister and says, Julie, how's your trip going? You appreciate how weird that is, right? People say, what'd you do on the way back? On the way back, we didn't do anything, and they had 2 fights. Now, we get back home, fairy tale's over. They resume their normal sibling rivalry. We resume the normal 1, 2, 3. You never cure sibling rivalry, by the way, but it was one of the best vacations we ever had. Now, that's not the only thing you can do. You can do the car bingo game, the alphabet game, the color game. You want to go from here to Door County, you leave at 4 in the morning. The kids sleep through most of the trip. I had a family once, and they went from Chicago to Arkansas for a family reunion, 15-hour drive. They had 2 ADD kids, a boy and a girl, each kid worse than the other one. And they got this trip. This guy put on his thinking cap. He went to the store and bought a VCR which plugs into the cigarette lighter. And then he went to the video store and he rented 20 movies. I said to him, he left, I said, good luck, tell me how it went when you get back. Guy comes back, I said, how did it go? He said, great. He said there was a short fight every 2 hours when they changed the movie. And then peace and quiet for 2 hours, and that was it. So there's a lot of things you can do on these trips. You know, you put one in the front, one in the back. The main thing is to put your thinking cap on. Don't just hop into the car and think, isn't this going to be a lovely trip?
There are 3 situations in which children present adults with problems that require some minor modifications in the 1, 2, 3 procedure. These are sibling rivalry, temper tantrums, and pouting. Dr. Phelan explains.
Okay, there are certain things when you're doing the 1, 2, 3 that you have to vary the method just a little bit because of the nature of the problem. And those are sibling rivalry, temper tantrums, and pouting. Now, sibling rivalry at home, fighting between kids at school for a teacher or a playground supervisor or something like that, but it's complicated because there's 2 people involved in it. So I have several basic rules. The first rule is when the kids are fighting, 90% of the time, count both of them, unless one is the obvious, unprovoked aggressor, and you are absolutely positive, but be very careful because by now you know what? Kids are tricky. You can be there the whole time, some of the time, see the whole thing, and you're still not sure who started it. Ever been riding in your car, for example? You're in the front seat, your 2 kids are in the back. Your left hand's on the steering wheel. From the back seat, you hear this voice say, Mom, he's looking at me again. What is your son stalking your daughter in the back seat? I mean, you know. What do you say? You say, that's 1 for both of you. You're going to count both kids. Second rule about sibling rivalry. When the kids are fighting, unless you suspect somebody has been physically injured and you have to examine their body, never ask the 2 stupidest questions, who started it or what happened. You know, what do you expect, George Washington to show up? I cannot tell a lie. Yes, I started this fight and the last 27 have been my personal responsibility, I'm very sorry. No, it's he did, she did, he did, she did, you know, back and forth, and so on. Third rule, never expect an older child to be more mature during a fight than a younger child. Don't say to your 11-year-old son, can't you put up with a little teasing, she's only a baby, referring to his 4-year-old younger sister. What did you just do? You loaded the gun of a little girl who will deeply appreciate it and use it to maximum advantage. Now, let's just imagine, and the other rule is don't send 2 fighting kids who share a room to the same room. Now, let's imagine for a second, this is a bit of a digression, but it's important. Let's imagine you have an 11-year-old son and a 4-year-old daughter. And the 11-year-old boy is getting 10-minute timeouts, and the 4-year-old is getting 5-minute timeouts. And one day your son walks up to you and he says,
"Hey, Dad.
Yeah?
You know this timeout thing?
Sure.
How come when I get a timeout, it's way longer than little Miss Shrimp over there?"
That's because we have a rule that you get about 1 minute of timeout for every year you've been on this planet.
Well, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
And that's 1.
Oh, brother.
is this a discussion or an attack? It was a discussion, now it's an attack. You discuss discussions, you count attacks. Some people come from this program and they think they're not supposed to talk to their kids anymore. They're missing the point. The point is you get the discipline over so you can talk to your kids more. But sometimes it's a little tricky. Your daughter comes home from school and says, "I hate my music teacher. My music teacher's an idiot." Don't say that's one. What should you say? What happened? You know? What if the kid comes up to you and says, "I hate you"? Well, I would suggest you listen first to find out what they're talking about. Maybe discipline will be necessary, maybe it will not. Second, temper tantrums. What are the variations here? Well, variation is this. You have a child and the kid is tantruming. And so you say that's 1, that's 2, that's 3. Now the child is in the room tantruming for a 5-minute timeout.
Boy, this is dumb. This is so dumb, it's beyond description. Are you gonna be sorry? I'm never coming out again as long as I live. See if I ever eat any of your rotten meals again.
5 minutes have gone by, but what's not done is the tantrum. So what are you going to do? What you do, and you could probably guess this yourself, is you don't start the timeout until the tantrum is over. So if the kid wants to tantrum and yell and scream for 30 minutes, 5-minute timeout starts after 30 minutes. 3 hours, 3-hour tantrum could be a room wrecker. Timeout starts after 3 hours. And don't be sticking your head in there every 5 minutes saying, "Come on now, don't you think that's enough? You know, we miss you. You have homework to do," all this kind of, just be quiet and let them go at it. Make sure the room is safe if you're going to do that. And the third variation is pouting. Pouting is a passive behavior. It's designed to make you feel guilty. If you do feel guilty, that's your problem. You know, why should you feel guilty for trying to be a good parent? So you say to your 8-year-old daughter, she's sitting on the couch watching TV, "Please turn off the TV and get ready for bed." You get the face. What do? You just walk away and ignore it. You do not need to count it. Only time we do something different is if we get what we call an aggressive pouter. An aggressive pouter is a kid who follows you all around the house to make sure you don't miss a minute of the sour puss. That's one. We're not going to let them rub our nose in it.
At this point, you have a pretty good idea about how to use counting to manage difficult behavior. Soon it will be time to start. Won't your kids be surprised? One caution. Don't begin the 1, 2, 3 magic program until you have finished watching this video and you are ready. Then, sit your children down and tell them that things are going to be different.
How do you get started with the 1, 2, 3? You know, some of you are probably wondering, do I just go home and start throwing numbers all over the place? Or do we tell the kids? Yes, we tell the kids something is coming, something's going to be different. And I'll tell you the home version and the school version of what we call the kickoff conversation. It's the shortest chapter in the book. At home, you sit the kids down, mom and dad preferably. Even if you're not living together, it's a good idea to do the kickoff conversation together if you're going to, both spouses are going to do it. So you sit the kids down between the ages of approximately 2 and 12.
Okay, guys, now that's the 1, 2, 3. Now there's one thing about this that you'll like and one thing you won't like. Now what you won't like is that if you do something pretty bad, like swear or hit, that's an automatic 3, and you'll get more time.
What you will like is once you come out of the rest period, we won't talk about what happened at all, unless it's something really unusual.
So, Any questions?
I think Mom went to the bookstore again.
How long do you think this one's gonna last?
Don't expect them to get the idea until you actually start doing it. Some kids learn the 1, 2, 3 by being counted themselves. Some kids learn the 1, 2, 3 vicariously by watching their brothers and sisters get timed out and come. But the first time you say that's 1, they don't have a feel for what it is until they've actually been through it or seen it. What do you do in school? If you're a teacher in school, it's easier to start the 1, 2, 3, of course, in the beginning of the year. But you can start it during the middle of the year if you want. If you start at the beginning of the year, what a lot of teachers do is they will take the first week of school, and at different times during that week, they will explain the 1, 2, 3 to their classroom. So here you can imagine a teacher standing up in front of the class, and she is explaining it to the kids.
Here's the deal, kids. This year we're going to use something called counting. Here's how it goes. Suppose you're talking to your neighbor, or getting out of your seat, or doing something else you're not supposed to. I'm going to say, that's 1. That's your first warning. Let's say you do something else you're not supposed to, whether it's the same kind of thing or something else. I'm going to say, that's 2. That's your second warning. To keep track of how many times I've had to count you, we're going to use this behavior stoplight. Each one of you has a clip that has your name on it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to move your name from green up to yellow if I have to count you. If you continue that kind of behavior and you don't improve it, I'm going to move you from yellow up to red. That means a note goes home to your parents.
Second week, the kids explain the program back to the teacher.
Can anyone tell me what kinds of things we're going to be counting? DeMarco?
Kicking.
You're exactly right. Anybody else? Can anybody else tell me what kind of things we're going to count? Stephanie?
Talking out loud.
You're exactly right. That's another thing that we would count.
Some teachers have also used our video. Kids are very interested in the 1, 2, 3 video because children love to see other kids getting in trouble. So it'll hold their interest. And the second week, then, when the teacher is getting the explanation from the children, a lot of teachers also have a parent night, and where they explain a lot of stuff. Among them, they may explain the 1, 2, 3 to the parents, and they may show part of the video so the parents have that. Then what can you do during the year? Well, if you're a teacher and you're having a behavior problem with this kid, you can get together with the parents, and you can do 1, 2, 3 at home, 1, 2, 3 at school, and you can coordinate, which makes things usually a lot more effective.
When you start using the 1, 2, 3, many children will cooperate immediately. That's the good news. Other kids, though, are going to give you a hard time right away. We don't know of too many children who ever thank their parents or teachers for watching this tape. So, our countdown to sanity continues with the 6 kinds of testing and manipulation, and exactly how to handle them.
In the beginning, I told you that when you start out, especially parents, not so much teachers, but when you start out, half the kids are going to cooperate, and the other half of the kids at home are going to give you a hard time. We call this testing and manipulation. Good parents are what? Warm and demanding. Warm means warm, supportive, you're there for the kids, you take care of them and all that. Demanding means you ask the kids to do things. You tell them they cannot do things. Get up in the morning, go to bed, do your homework and all this kind of stuff. If you're doing your job as a parent, you are irritating your kids regularly. Sounds kind of funny, and people often laugh when I say that, but it's really true. Now, when you're frustrating a child by asking them to do something, they have 2 choices. They can cooperate, or they can test and manipulate. And we're going to talk about testing and manipulation. If they test and manipulate, they have 6 choices, which I'm about to present to you, the 6 different types of testing and manipulation. So when kids are testing, what are they doing? They're trying to get their way. I don't want to cooperate. I don't want to go to bed. I don't want to stop teasing my sister. I do want those Fritos. And so I'm going to try and put some emotional pressure on you, mom or dad or teacher, so you will give me my way. That's testing and manipulation. So testing has a purpose, but testing can have a second purpose as well, and that is this. You'll notice some of the time that kids will test you when they're not getting their way, and you still don't give them their way, but they continue the testing behavior. Why would they do that? Answer is simple. It's revenge. Mom, dad, teacher, you didn't give me what I wanted. You're going to pay. Does this mean the kids are professional criminals? No. Does it mean they're mentally ill? No. Natural response. I didn't get what I want. I'm mad, and you're going to get it. Let's look at the different kinds of testing and manipulation. The first one is badgering.
Please. Please, Mom. Please, come on. Mom. Please, just this once. Please, just this once. Mommy, come on. One time. Mommy.
There are some children who should have been machine guns in the Second World War. That's badgering. Just give me what I want, give me this stupid thing, and I'll shut up. Second tactic is temper, or what we sometimes call intimidation. This can involve yelling at you. Little kids throw themselves down on the floor, bite their arm, bang their head, scream. Older kids may accuse you of being a bad parent.
This is so dumb. I can't believe it.
All my friends think you guys are nuts.
Can I go outside for 2 minutes?
No, I have to do homework.
Third tactic is threat.
That's it. I'm running away from home.
I'm never doing another bit of homework. Ever.
I'm never gonna eat again.
One little girl came down to her mother just a couple weeks ago, and her mom wouldn't let her sleep over to friends. Little girl, really cute. She's nine years old. She walks into the kitchen, her mom is cooking dinner. Little girl stands there, looks at her mom and says, "I'm going to stand here and stare at you until you change your mind." Tactic number 4, martyrdom. Crying, pouting, looking sad, looking teary, saying stuff like,
No one around here loves me anymore.
I never get anything.
Well, I guess nobody around here loves me anymore.
designed to make you feel what? Guilty. And it's a hard one for parents to handle. Martyrdom may take the cake in terms of parental difficulty in managing testing. Some parents have a guilt button the size of the state of Wyoming, and all the kids got to do is give it a poke, and they get what they want. Tactic number 5, butter up. Now, the first 4 tactics are different from butter up. First 4 tactics, what's the kid doing? What the child is doing with badgering, intimidation, threat, and martyrdom is saying, look, Mom or Dad, you're frustrating me by not giving me what I want. But now I am frustrating you back by my badgering, intimidation, threat, and martyrdom. Now that we're both frustrated, I will offer you a deal. You call off your dogs, I'll call off mine. You give me what I want, I'll knock this stuff off. And you know what? If you give the kids what they want, they'll knock off the testing in a split second, guaranteed. Some people say, oh, thank God, there's a way to get rid of testing and manipulation. Certainly is. What's the problem? Who's running your house? It's not you anymore, it's the kids. All they got to do in the pinch, get their big guns out, aim them at you, and you are chopped liver. With butter up, the tactic is unusual because the child here is going to try and make you feel good. Going to try and make you feel good, and this often precedes the frustrating event. The frustrated child or frustrated to-be child looks at you and says,
Please, Mom, I promise I'll never ask for anything else.
I think I'll go clean my room. It's been looking kind of messy for the last 3 years.
You've got the prettiest eyes of anybody on the block.
This is hard to tell from genuine affection. If a kid comes up to you in the morning on a Saturday morning and says, Dad, if I clean up my bedroom by noon, according to your specifications, can I have Charlie sleep over tonight? That's a deal. You know, that's a deal. But have you ever heard anybody say, the only time this kid's nice is when they want something? Chances are it's butter up. And the 6th tactic, possibly the worst, is physical tactics. Either running away, breaking stuff, or physically attacking you. Kids can throw stuff around, but it's something where they use their arms and their legs more than their words to get what they want. In our research, the favorite tactics of kids are numbers 1, 2, and 4, which means badgering, temper, intimidation, that's 1, and martyrdom. Girls like martyrdom more than boys, as you might expect, and guess which sex likes temper? Boys like it more than girls. Both sexes seem to like badgering. Now, testing tactics, I'm giving you kind of the pure testing forms if you want. These tactics can be combined. at different times. So a child could be doing butter up and badgering at the same time. If they're please, you know, please, please, I promise, I promise, I promise, and all this kind of stuff. It could be what we call a 51 pattern. There's one combination that's very, very famous. In fact, I've debated putting it on the testing list as number 7. And in some research we did recently where we asked parents, what's the most obnoxious thing your kids do? This was the number 1 thing of all the things that parents reported to us. The tactic, it's a testing tactic, it's a combination. It's a combination of number 4, martyrdom, and number 1, badgering. The word describing it starts with the letter W. Whining, that's correct, whining. Whining drives parents insane. What are you going to do with whining? You're going to count whining. Some people say, oh, she looks so frail when she whines. She looks like she's going to fall into a million pieces. Count whining. You know, it'll end it, and that's the end of that. You don't need a whole book on whining. Now, you understand the 6 types of testing and manipulation. Now comes the $64,000 question. Think of your kids one at a time. If you're a teacher, you can do this mini behavioral analysis for each of the kids in your classroom as well. And for each child, student or son or daughter, answer this question. Does this child of mine have a favorite tactic on the list? One that they use over and over and over. I see some people nodding yes, which is often the way it is. If your child has a favorite tactic, that's bad. Why is it bad? It's working for them. What does working mean? Working means one of 2 things. Working means either, number 1, they're getting their way. How does a kid know if he's getting his way? You give it to him. You give him the Fritos at 6 when he shouldn't have them. You let him keep teasing his sister when he shouldn't do that. You don't make him go to bed. How does a kid know if he's getting effective revenge? This takes us back to what? The no talking, no emotion rules. If this little child can get big old you all upset and yakety yakety yak, they know they've gotten effective revenge. Dad says to his 9-year-old son, please turn off the TV and finish your homework. Kid blows. He pulls a number 2. Okay? Major nuclear tantrum. What's Dad's reaction? Dad has a counter temper tantrum. He gets mad worse than the kid. What's the final score of this interaction? Child 5, Dad 2. Kid wins. He got Dad to blow. Does he know how to press his old man's buttons? You bet your boots. Is he going to do it again in the future? You bet your boots he's going to do it again in the future. He has that tactic for revenge, even though he's not getting his way. So now you know what you cannot do with testing and manipulation. When your kids are testing, number 1, you cannot give them their way. And number 2, you have to keep your cool so that you don't give them effective revenge. Now we're talking something that is not easy at all. Very difficult. So let's imagine you leave this workshop, you know, and you think, okay, I'm on to this kid now, you know, I'm not putting up with any more of this stuff. And you go home.
It's great.
It's really nice. Hey, honey.
Dad, can we go out for ice cream real quick?
Oh, sorry, honey. It's too late. You know, and I've got to call your Aunt Martha.
Please, just this once. Please.
Sorry.
That's really stupid. The old bag can wait a few minutes.
You watch your language.
See if I ever do anything for you anymore. I never get to do what I want. Please, Dad. I promise I'll go to bed 15 minutes early and brush my teeth without complaining.
What's she doing? She's switching tactics on you. Now, switching tactics can be a sign that you are actually handling things effectively. She's going from one thing to one thing to one thing. But parents often say to me, is that what I'm going to have to go through? And the answer is no. Because why? How are you going to handle testing and manipulation? Now we return back to a very simple part of the 1, 2, 3 program. If I asked you, if you look at the list, badgering, temper, threat, martyrdom, forget butter up, and physical tactics, and I said, is this stop behavior or start behavior? You'd say it's stop behavior. That's correct. It's obnoxious behavior. What do you do with that? You count it. So the simple answer is testing and manipulation has to be recognized and then counted. Remember the Twinkie example? Little girl says, yeah, but I want one. What is that? Tactic number 1, badgering. She already had the explanation why she couldn't have it. Now she's badgering her mother. Parent says that's 1. Then the little girl says, you never give me anything. Which one is that? Number 4, martyrdom. That's correct. Parent says that's 2. Then the little girl says, I hate your guts. I'm going to kill myself and run away from home. which is an obvious 23 combo. A little bit of temper, little bit of threat. Parent says that's 3, take 5, child is gone. So testing. Some of the real bad stuff, like in temper, you know, if they swear at you or try and hit you, that'd be physical too. Automatic 3, and extended time. There's only 2 things on that list that are not counted. One is pouting, which is buried in the martyrdom category. Remember, passive pouting is not counted. The other thing that's not counted usually is butter up. Child says to you, gee, Mom, you got the prettiest eyes of anybody on the block. You would not say, that's one. It would be fairly strange. So testing and manipulation, by and large, you have to think in terms of testing and manipulation. And what's your cue? Your cue is you just frustrated your kid about something. They're frustrated, brace for it. Don't say, oh, I hope he doesn't give me a hard time. Just say, I'm the parent, you're the kid, shoot away, and I will count it if I have to.
When you first begin to use counting for difficult behavior, sometimes your kids will cooperate and other times they will get upset. It's very important to keep one thing in mind. Just because your kids get frustrated with you does not mean you are doing your job poorly. You are doing your job poorly, however, if you get too exasperated and talk too much. To give you a better feel of how the 1, 2, 3 works, let's look at some examples of counting in action.
Okay, counting takes practice, and I found a lot of parents and teachers can go home and they start doing it and they become very adept really in a very short period of time. The other thing about it that's good is that kids learn it in a very quick, short period of time. But it still takes practice. So I want to run through with you a few examples of what we call counting in action. Our first example is a familiar summertime refrain to many parents. This summer's coming up and you're going to be getting this. Kids come into you and they say, there's nothing to do. I'm bored. And let's look at this scene and we'll have our parent first do it what we call the wrong way and then do the counting the right way. Here's how the scene goes.
There's nothing to do.
Why don't you and your friends go down to the pool?
We just did yesterday and it's too hot.
Well then, why don't you play your video game?
Nah.
Why don't you go take a hike to Timbuktu?
What?
Just kidding.
Ma, it's not funny.
Well, don't be giving me a hard time about it. Everything I have suggested is not good enough for your Royal Highness. You know, I'm not the entertainment committee around here. Why don't you just go find something to do and leave me alone?
But you said you'll take us to Creature Castle at the new mall.
I can't today. I have a million things I've got to do here.
See, we never get to do anything that we want.
Okay, unfortunate outcome. And parents blowing it, not handling it well at all. Let's do it the right way.
There's nothing to do.
Why don't you and your friends go down to the pool?
We just did yesterday and it's too hot.
Well then, why don't you play your video game?
Nah.
Well, I'm sorry, I can't think of anything else. I guess I can't help you out today. And anyways, I have just too many things I've got to do around here.
You said you'll take us to Creature Castle at the new mall.
That's 1.
See, we never get to do anything we want.
That's 2.
Now, you could argue maybe Mom waited a little long to do the first count, but it's still much better. Talking stops, that's 1. I'm not going to argue it anymore. Here's another example.
Hey.
Well, that was my mother on the phone, and I guess Dad is not doing well at all. In fact, they just had to take him to the hospital.
Hi, guys.
Hi, honey. Listen, Mom and Dad have to talk about something very important for a few minutes, so you go outside and play for a bit.
I want to be here. I promise I won't listen.
No, dear, now. You just go outside and play.
I want to stay here.
Listen, young lady, we're not going to tell you again.
I just want to talk to you guys.
Do you want a spanking?
Okay, that's 1.
Lousy use of counting, okay? Everybody's upset. They're upset to begin with. Now they got the little girl upset. They need some time to talk it over before they tell her what's going on. So let's do this one again.
Hey, honey.
That was my mother on the phone, and I guess Dad is not doing very well at all. In fact, they just had to take him to the hospital.
Do you want to fly out? Because I can call right now.
Hi, guys.
Hi, honey. Listen, Mom and Dad have to talk about something very important for a few minutes, so you go outside and play for a bit.
I want to be here with you. I promise I won't listen.
That's one, honey.
I want to stay here.
That's two.
Man, I never get to do anything.
Much better. Kid's unhappy, she'll get over it. You know, parents have time to talk about a more serious subject. Another example, little boys are always fascinated by their father's power tools. So we have this scene.
Mom, I want to use Dad's jigsaw to cut something out.
I don't think so. You better wait till he gets home.
Come on, Mom. I know how to do it.
No, I think it's too dangerous.
It'll only take 2 minutes.
I said no. That's 1.
That's 1. That's 2. That's 12. That's 20. That's stupid.
That's 2.
Didn't know you could count that high.
That's 3. Take 10 and add 5 for the mouth.
Gee, I'll need a calculator for this one.
Mom did very well. Some parents get confused by the kids counting. You know, you say that's 1, they say that's 1 to you too. What do? If it's a super snotty response, that's 2. And guess what they're going to say? You know, that's 2 to you too. Kids counting doesn't mean anything. They might as well say the moon is made out of blueberry yogurt. It means nothing. So you're the only one who's authorized to count. Here's an example of counting in a classroom.
This year we're going to be learning about oceans, like the Atlantic Ocean, the Pacific Ocean, the Arctic Ocean, the Indian Ocean. We're going to be learning all about those kinds of oceans, and we're going to be also learning about the creatures that live in those oceans. Stephanie and Emily, that's 1.
But it's very helpful for quickly getting rid of that, you know. And notice, that's 1, rather than, come on now, girls, you know you're not supposed to be talking. Now, what are you doing? Now you're getting the whole class upset. We get it over with. Nobody is perfect, and in the 1, 2, 3, we certainly don't expect you to be perfect. So we discussed before we stop what we call slipping. Slipping is you fall off the wagon. You know, you're doing well, and you start talking too much, or you start getting too excited. The causes of slipping are travel, visitors, illness, just plain time, and new babies. And there's probably a few others. But they jolt you. They get you out of sync, and so you don't know exactly where you stand. The good news about slipping is you can recover. You can redo the kickoff conversation if you've been going bad for, you know, had a new baby come and you've been just out of whack for 2 months. Sit down, redo the kickoff conversation. Guys, we've been getting really sloppy. We're going to do the counting again. You can also recover with what we call short-term slipping. You're just having a bad day. And so you start yelling at the kids, and you can recover right in front of them. Let me give you an example.
He's hitting me. I was not. You're a pig. Shut up, you idiot.
Knock it off, guys.
Pig, idiot.
Now knock it off. I am sick and tired of you guys picking on each other all the time.
Don't pinch me, don't.
Okay, gang. I'm not doing my job right. We're going back on counting. As of right now, you're both on 1. You hit 3, and it's 15 minutes off your TV time tonight. It's up to both of you.
That's not fair. I wasn't doing anything. Oh, yeah, little Miss Innocent.
Now that's 2.
Good job by Mom. She recovered, she started by talking too much, getting too excited, and she pulled herself together.
Well, it's almost time to get started. Remember that in this video program, we are dealing with difficult behavior, like arguing, whining, or fighting. In our next video, more 1, 2, 3 magic, we'll talk about how to encourage good behavior in your children, such as going to bed, eating, and picking up after themselves. You may be surprised to hear what many children say about 1, 2, 3 magic. They say, I like it because Mom and Dad don't yell so much. Discipline will always be an inevitable part of raising kids. When discipline is handled gently and efficiently, your home becomes more peaceful, affection unfolds naturally, and you have more time to have fun with your youngsters. That's the way it should be.
1, 2, 3 works if you do it and you do it correctly. Okay? Especially with regard to the no talking and no emotion rules. That's religion as far as this program or any program is concerned. If you're going to talk too much or get too excited, you might as well not be here. 1, 2, 3 works better if both parents use it. And that almost goes without saying, but it's a good point. However, I often get questions from one parent. I'm using it, my spouse is not. We're in the same house. Can I still use it? The answer is yes. Okay. If you're separated or divorced, and you can use it at home even if the other person is not. We hope they're doing something reasonable. Single parents, however, can use the 1, 2, 3 by themselves. And it's also helpful for other caretakers, grandparents, babysitters, preschools, teachers, schools can all use it. What if you're struggling? You've been doing the 1, 2, 3, and you're just having a struggle. Struggles with the 1, 2, 3 can come from several different places. One is marital disagreements. A disagreement with your spouse all the time, it can get in the way of doing it. So maybe a counselor would be indicated. Counseling can also be indicated when one or both parents has trouble with the no talking, no emotion rules. What can cause that? One thing, just one, there are plenty. One thing that can cause trouble with that is depression. Depression can make some people so passive that the kids run the house. Depression can make other people so irritable that they count way too much. I had a lady once, she told me, she said, I remember laying in bed when I was 9 years old, crying. What were you crying about? I was crying because of the way my parents had treated me that day. They had yelled at me and struck me. And she said, I remember 20 years later, I'm 29 years old, I'm a parent, I'm laying in bed at night crying. What are you crying about? I just did the same thing to my kids. Counseling may be in order. Counseling also may be in order. You may have to look at the kid. The first two things I mentioned, the marital and the last one, are looking at the adult. But some kids are a lot more difficult. Now, the 1, 2, 3 is for average kids as well as special needs kids, ADD kids, oppositional kids, autistic kids. All they have to have is a mental age of 2. We've used it with learning disabled, hearing impaired, visually impaired. It's so simple, it's good for almost anybody. But if you've been doing it for about 3 weeks or so and you feel like, gee, just not, it's not falling into place, maybe it's time to have an evaluation as far as your child is concerned. What's the payoff? The payoff is I think you can enjoy your kids and you will feel more, when you get the discipline stuff out of the way, you feel more like listening, like praising your kids, and like having fun with them. Teachers feel more like being with the kids. They have more time for instructions. And your self-esteem as a teacher or a parent, I think, will go up. Discipline problems are shorter. You get them over with. Let's do our Twinkie example. Remember the Twinkie example before? How's it going to go after the 1, 2, 3 has been in place for a while? It might go something like this.
Hey, Mom. I suppose it's too close to dinner for a Twinkie.
You guessed it.
Okay. Oh, did I tell you about Melissa's party coming up?
No, tell me about it.
Issue's done. It's over with. Taken care of by good discipline. We don't have to have a big fight. One of the best commentaries I ever had on the 1, 2, 3 came from a mother who came to me. She had 3 kids. And she said, you know something, Dr. Phelan? I wake up in the morning depressed on school days. Why are you depressed? The very thought of getting these kids up and out for school is depressing to me. We taught her the 1, 2, 3. She started doing it. She came in and she said, I didn't realize how far I had come with this. She got it shaped up, not perfect, but she was doing a lot better. She said, I didn't realize how far I had come until Christmas vacation. I said, what do you mean? She said, the kids came home for Christmas vacation. We actually had a pretty good time. But she said, I really didn't realize how far I had come until after they went back to school after Christmas vacation. I said, why? She said, I missed them for the first time in my life. So, we hope something like that may happen with you. I want to thank you very much for coming, and I want you to go home and go get them. Good luck with your kids. Thank you. Thank you.
I think when I grow up, I'll use it on my kids, and I can tell them that when they stop, I can say, your grandma used this on me when I was little. And so then they'll know that I didn't just learn it now, they'll know that I've known it for almost my whole life then.
That's why they stand by the pan left. Okay. You understand this is a special shot, all right? Okay, this is scene 611, take 6, action.
Hey, Mom. I suppose it's too close to dinner to have a Twinkie.
Oh, heck no. Knock yourself out, kiddo.
Okay.
Pan left.
funny, very funny.
All that work and we got such a physical response.
Can I eat it?
You can take it
Oh,
home
you're
with you.
close to dinner.
Haven't you
Hey, wait.
heard?
Poor kid got, it's 3 hours till dinner. She
I'm
can
gonna
have
eat
it.
it.
All right, let's do the close-ups on these. Squeaky
Should
wheel
I
gets
not
the
open
Twinkie.
it yet?
Oh, it's not really in the scene.
As far as I'm concerned, it's yours.
It'll be.
I sleep for hours on those Twinkies. I want you to know.
Spirit around your face more. We're only going to do the close-ups next.
Are you happy now?
Mm-hmm.
Quit bugging me before dinner.
Okay.
Handling difficult behavior and managing testing and manipulation are only part of the parenting job. Dr. Phelan's next video program, More 123 Magic, covers the parental tasks of encouraging good behavior, independence, and self-esteem. Learn how to get your kids to go to bed and stay there. Teach the kids to get up and out in the morning and pick up after themselves, and at the same time, discover how to avoid civil wars over homework and mealtimes. During More 123 Magic, you'll enjoy having some good laughs, both at yourself and at parenting in general. But more important, you will also learn practical and down-to-earth strategies for encouraging your child's growing independence and for promoting reasonable, healthy self-esteem. Learn how the family meeting can help get kids more involved. And hear Dr. Phelan describe the 3 parental qualities that are essential to good parenting. Video Librarian says More 123 Magic is highly recommended and a must-buy for parents who want to raise competent, responsible, and happy kids. Order your copy today by calling 1-800-442-4453. Your kids may be little now, but before you know it, they'll be teenagers. The good news, though, is that your teens don't have to drive you crazy. Now, Dr. Thomas W. Phelan's best-selling book, Surviving Your Adolescence: How to Manage and Let Go of Your 13 to 18-year-olds, is available as a 2-hour video. Living with a teenager is no picnic. There are times when you must bite your tongue as your kids push towards independence. Dr. Phelan will explain exactly when you should get involved and when you should let go. In a humorous but sensible manner, Surviving Your Adolescence will also describe the 3 biggest risks teenagers face, the interesting connection between parent-teen communication and adolescent safety, how to avoid the 4 cardinal sins that often ruin family relationships, and how parents can decide what role to play when they are concerned about a problem. Dr. Phelan also tackles the daunting task of trying to define a normal teenager. Surviving Your Adolescence is for teens as well as for their parents. Concise and encouraging, this practical video program is vital for parents and adolescents who need to stay in touch. Order your copy today by calling 1-800-442-4453.